A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kanchi Shah, and I head the EMEA business for strategy. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the fourth episode of the webinar series on proactive business resilience insights. I welcome you on behalf of Dell Technologies, 22 by 7 Solutions, and Strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, the world in which we live is changing, and the threats we face seem to be growing both in volume and complexity. Each day, we grow more connected in terms of technology, economies, and infrastructure than we've ever been in the past. While natural disasters often grab headlines, human caused events can have widespread consequences too. Because these crises and disruptions are so deeply linked with the very nature of businesses that we conduct and how we pursue them, it has become increasingly important to view these risks as more intrinsic and ubiquitous and exceptional. They are no longer once in a lifetime concerns. In other words, risks are a part of the spectrum of operational factors that organizations are now being built around. To encompass those factors means focusing not just on recovery, but also on agility and the ever greater resilience so as to reduce the impact of events and speed up response. Let's begin today's session with a discussion on the future of enterprise business resilience. Our session is going to have inputs by Mr. Kumar Ravi, CISO Teleperformance India, who's in a conversation with Mr. Amit Dhawan, CISO and DPO Birlasoft. Over to the two of you.
Oh, hi, good day, everybody. And I hope all of you are keeping safe in this time of pandemic. Uh, in a perfect world, an organization systems would run without any issue 24/7, 365 days. However, that is utopia and that doesn't happen every day. Wrong things happen. And when they do, the organization's ability to continue their business will depend on its resilience. Now, the reasons of these failures could be anything from a pandemic that we've recently seen to system malfunction, uh, man-made errors, intentional or unintentional, or it could be anything. The test for resiliency, these days is just more stronger, and the sophistication of attacks has just increased quite a lot. So business leaders in all organizations must proactively plan for disruptions in their day-to-day services. The potential impact of some of these disruptions could be to minor business operations, or they could be far-reaching, life-threatening, or even cataclysmic. Cyber risk, which we are here to talk about, uh, cyber risk and the stakes continue to rise. As I mentioned, the sophistication of attacks is very high. If you go down the road of history, you will see it was plain simple viruses. And then, when the malware started, when the ransomware started, they were just, encrypting your systems. And then they started extracting the data, and then the extortion started. And then, even when that was not enough, the folks who are running these systems started sending emails after extracting the data to the customers of your company. So it is very, very important that you are vigilant, that you have cyber resiliency in place. The another factor which is leading to these kind of issues is because the organizations are joined together in massive ecosystems with their customers, with their vendors, partners. Uh, and all of them are so deeply interconnected that any single problem in any one of those areas, uh, has a major impact uh, all across. Target was one of the areas that we've seen earlier, and the supply chain risks that we talk about, the recent ones which were there, had a major impact not only on those companies but on their customers and to some extent to the global economy as well. So today we are here with a very good friend of mine, Kumar Ravi, Chief Information Security Officer of Teleperformance India. He is an expert uh, and a very dear friend, expert in knowledge, expert in experience. He has a fantastic view on all these things, and we will talk about all these things today. Thank you, Kumar Ravi, for joining us.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for the warm introduction. Look forward to a great session.
So, Kumar, I know you come from a background of EXL and now Teleperformance in this space, where the customer data, where the customer interaction, and a lot of third-party interaction are very, very crucial. How do you know uh, how do you identify the information that you need to work on, associate them with the security vulnerabilities, and do the overall management? Do you follow some standards in all these areas?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Amit. And I think that's the right start. In fact, I think it's a complete life cycle. I think this is one question that starts, but kind of takes all the responses around that in its fold. So let me kind of put my response restricted to the identification of vulnerabilities, identification of assets, and how do you associate them? And like I said, I think it's the right start. So you should know what your crown jewels are, and which are the ones, the assets, which if get impacted, they would be not as harmful as, probably the other critical ones. So I think the higher value assets should be identified and protected with the, higher standards than the minimum baseline. Uh, I think as per the risk assessment standards, if we go, to the roots of information security management systems, at the even the foundational layer, you identify the, your assets or information assets based on their criticality, which is, if the assets, I would say confidentiality, integrity, or availability is compromised, what will be the impact of the organization? So that's what a typical risk assessment standard, would tell you. And so you reach out to the business to find out those insights as to which are your critical assets, and what if they get impacted, what will be the impact. And then there are central critical IT infrastructure assets and services which are the backbone for the company's operations. So something like your Active Directory, your email systems, your ERPs, those are like backbones of the organization. So I think you have to do an extensive study in line with the business teams to identify what really matters for the organizations, because I think that's where you should put a prioritized focus for remediation, protection, recovery, and all the life cycle stages of the cyber resilience strategy, or a cyber resilience plan, if I may say. So that's how the asset identification based on the criticality comes into piece. On the other side, when we talk about the vulnerabilities identification, I think this can broadly be categorized into two parts, because now you have the assets. Now you have to look for what are the vulnerabilities. So I think the traditional way would be, you do the vulnerability assessments and penetration testings, and that has been the historical practice. And even most of the organizations still, stop at this layer. But no, I think given the, I would say, a risk context, or I would say a cyber risk landscape that we see today, the advanced threats coming in, the I would say sophisticated threat actors coming in, you should definitely extend it to something like a red teaming exercise, bug bounty program, doing the cyber drills. I think all these are very important. uh, then apart from that, and by the way, this will cover your technical risk assessment, the traditional ways and the contemporary ways. Then the second stream is the subjective risk assessment of your critical assets that you identify. And this practice will include the design and architecture study. This will include your information lifecycle study. This will include your information flow study around the system. And this gives you a lot of insights, and I would say a vulnerable insights into the system that you are trying to protect. And then finally, on a lighter note, there is a third type of vulnerability identification, which is called a zero-day vulnerabilities, which the bad guys will surprise you with, and you will not be able to identify yourself. So I think that's how I summarize the overall, asset identification, vulnerability identification, and then associating the two, Amit.
Fantastic, Kumar. Fantastic. Uh, I personally, I have been a big advocate of uh, the role of a CISO in an organization. The role of a CISO organization, the role of a CISO in an organization is not to protect information, but to be an influencer. Not only to protect information, but to be an influencer. And as you rightly mentioned, there has to be a lot of interaction with business. Unless you understand what business does, we will not be able to protect what we need to protect. Uh, and this is where I would say that when you mentioned about the design architecture, I would go a step further and I would suggest that the CISOs, these days CIOs are getting included in the strategy discussions of the organization. It is high time that CISOs also start getting included in those strategies, because when you mention design architecture of the business systems which are going to come, that is going to be very, very important. And you know unless you know the direction of the movement of technology, your value add will not be that much. If you know where the company is heading, where the technology is heading, merge both of them, identify risk. So as you rightly mentioned, lot of interaction with business, lot of interaction with the organization to define your strategy. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. I'll just move on from here. You you mentioned about your strategy. You mentioned that you have higher assets which have higher valuation, assets which have lower valuation, and you have different protection strategies for both of them. Is my understanding correct on your, or you have some baseline and then you add more controls in some place and lesser controls in some place? How do you implement these kind of safeguards in different assets?
Yeah, so I think to start with, yes, you're right. Every organization probably starts with a basic ISMS practice. When I say basic, it doesn't mean basic, but a baseline, a standard. You define certain set of controls for all your assets. At best, you divide them into critical, confidential, internal, and public, and then you kind of put differentiating controls based on that categories. But that category itself has got a broad spectrum of assets, right? So one is to define the minimum baseline standards for the organization, which is like a broad base, and which is like painting the canvas with broad strokes. And then you identify your crown jewels, your topmost 10, 15, 20, depending on the kind of volume that you want to take, and the expansion of the business size. So, and then you selectively pick up those assets and information assets, and then you define a strategy or a recovery planning. First of all, a protection strategy, then a detection, and then a response and recovery strategy, keeping in mind which is very specific to that particular information system. Having said that, it should not be construed as that by protecting them you are safe, because I think we all understand the concept of our lateral movement. You get picked up on the least protected asset, and once you have a once you have penetrated the perimeter and you are already inside, the lateral movement from there is something which makes it pretty easy, because within the organization you would have all those vulnerable ports open, reachabilities open. So I think you should maintain a very good baseline for a generic purpose, but then there should be a specific focus on the directly exposed systems from outside, as to if you are keeping them safe from external actors which could be directly reaching out to those. So yes, the strategy has to be overall a balanced one. It should not only be focused on critical assets. It should not be a one size fits all. It has to be a balance of both.
Fantastic. So from a protection side, it is always good to have a common baseline and then keep adding it. Fantastic. So uh, keep putting more controls, like we take care of the assets at home. The home as such is protected with a certain baseline, but wherever our papers are kept, jewelry is kept, we put them into little more higher lock and key, as we say.
Yeah.
So I think it is just common sense that you take from your normal thing and you execute them in your environment.
Yes.
Nice, Kumar. Now when we talk about, you spoke about red teaming and you spoke about continuous way PT, that those days of once a quarter or once a year VAPT are gone. I don't think any organization does that. And if anybody is doing that, should be very, very scared. So,
Yeah.
you know, do you link those activities, that continuous VAPT or that continuous red teaming exercise? How do you dovetail that into your detection system for identifying attacks? Uh, you know, how do you ensure that the incident response teams are working in addition to what you're doing? Do you mix both of them? Do you attach the offensive and the defensive capabilities together to test?
I think if you get any feedback because of the deeper insights that you have got, because of the advanced testings that you have done, I think the whole idea is to know where are we lacking if an advanced attack happens on us. So I think if you do any such sort of testing, if the results come out, I think they should definitely go back to the, I would say a patching team, to the SOC team, to the network teams, firewall teams, that these are the learning that have come. In fact, we all know this purple teaming concept. So purple teaming concept actually takes both the teams together, and at every step there is like a good transparency between the teams. So I think both the teams work together. That's one. But yes, if you are doing a red teaming exercise, I think the person responsible for carrying out the red teaming should definitely take away the learning from the red teamings and socialize with the patching groups, resolver groups, and the control owner groups, and that should be taken care of.
I think that is the best advice we can give to the audience, that whenever you're doing any offensive activity, get your defensive folks also in place, so that they can see these attacks maybe in live and take preventive action. So a simulated drill, but a little more hands-on kind of drill, and rather not only a tabletop kind of exercise, but a live
Oh,
execution.
no, yeah, yeah. In fact, Amit, if I could just quickly add there, like historically when I did the red teaming exercise, we had a very structured plan of letting the blue team know when I was handling the red team. In fact, I was handling both the teams. It was red team as well as the blue team both together. So the instruction from the red team side or to the red team side was that, guys, you will do something, you will complete your exercise, but you will not let them know upfront. So first of all, we used to wait for a day, that if blue team came back saying that we detected something, if it's a dead silence, we will give them a little hint that, guys, we did something between this window. We will just give them the time to see if they could figure out. If the answer is no, they could not, we will release the second intel to them, that we did it with these IP addresses. Now, can you figure it out? Maybe. If the luck would be hard, then still nothing, then we would tell them the exact threat scenario that we simulated, what data breach we did, what infiltration or exfiltration we did. Then we give them the complete scenario, and then with these three stages we get to know with what level of information at least we are geared up to get to construe the full picture. So I think it was a layered revolution of what we did, and to check what is the level of preparation. But I think that was a fun exercise, but at the same time good learning, that with this information how much can you get.
That's interesting. And I completely agree with you that the blue team should not be told in advance, and it should come as a surprise, because that is where the efficacy of the blue team comes in. And on a personal standpoint, the people in blue team should be very, very, kind of honest and humble, that
Yeah.
yes, there is something that has happened in their network, and they should be able to, if they failed, they should take those learnings, put back into training, and maybe run those simulations again to see if it is working or not. Great.
Yeah, it is just preparing before someone else from outside comes and attack your house. Why not to attack ourselves and be prepared for an external one? I think yes, I completely agree with.
Great. One last thing, we all prepare for all kind of exigencies, and we do that. How do you develop and implement a plan to restore data or services affected by an attack?
So Amit, I think the recovery planning has to be there. There has to be a recovery strategy, adequate backups with the aligning with the rights RTO RPOs, as the principles of BCP says, should be in place. And then, periodic recovery testing is very important, because some of the times, you go back, and when you restore it in the real time, the actual restoration doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen the same way, or it doesn't happen in the same time. So a very real time, simulation of a data backup restoration should be periodically done. And when it comes to, deploying it in the runtime, I think definitely the priority of the criticality once again comes into play. You restore the most critical business services first, and the data followed by, the second set and the third set. So I think you should have adequate people, processes, and plan and testing in place, so that you are really not, bleeding on the wartime. So as they say, the more you, sweat in the
In
peacetime,
peace,
the
less you
less
bleed in war.
you yeah, bleed in the
Yeah.
wartime. So I think it goes here as well. I think your recovery planning and testing has to be, as good as possible, because once the identify, protect, detect is done, that is where the respond and recover phase come. Without the respond and recover, the entire strategy cannot be effective. So you may be wanting to spend millions of dollars in IDP, but response and recovery is, I think, very important as well. Should be thoroughly done, should be thoroughly planned. That's the last stage.
So thanks a lot, Kumar. It was a fantastic interaction. Some takeaways is something that identifies something that you have. Do not have a baseline on security strategy. Be articulative. Be you know evolve on your how you work for your organization. Understand what business does. Uh, Regularly test your systems and regularly test your teams, because the human factor really has to work. Define roles and responsibilities. Understand what is important for your business for them to be restored first. So cyber recovery, cyber resiliency, these are all very very big words, but actually they come with very very basic common sense and knowledge. And I really thank you, Kumar, for putting all these high big terms into very simple language. And I'm hoping that we all will learn and move ahead in this direction. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. Thanks for being a great host and always a good friend. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
pleasure to be with you on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar.
Thank you very much, Kumar. Thank you, Amit. That was indeed an engaging and engrossing session. Our next session, ladies and gentlemen, is a solution showcase on simplifying vulnerability management. And to take us through this, I'd like to welcome Mr. Akhil Rainey, Chief Technology Officer at Strobes. Over to you, Akhil.
Hello everyone, my name is Akhil Rainey, and today I'm going to talk about the challenges in vulnerability management space, especially when we are dealing with vulnerabilities at scale. So firstly, let me give you a quick introduction on who I am and what I do. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Strobes. Before that, I was a Chief Technology Officer at vSecure App. So working at vSecure App, I got a chance to design security roadmaps for many large enterprise organizations, especially from banking, finance, and healthcare industries. While working with these organizations, what I've realized was the vulnerability management process was a bit too chaotic. What they used to do was run an SS scan, export those issues, track them on an Excel sheet, and figure out what vulnerabilities have to be patched first. This whole process was way too tiring and used to eat a lot of IT and SecOps team's time. Well, this definitely cannot scale, and there is a high chance that we miss out on fixing a lot of immediate risks. What we actually need is vulnerabilities, assets along with their context, and threat context. Now let me explain each of this in an easier way. Assets and their context. Assets can be anything like endpoints, servers, applications, routers, cloud services, cloud accounts, and more. And when I say context, I basically mean the meta information that tags along with that assets. Do the assets hold PII information? does the asset belong to HR department, sales department, or any other department in general? Are they publicly available or exposed? And so on. And coming to vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are those that we get from a typical vulnerability scan or a pen test on the assets that we give as a scope. Usually these vulnerabilities are presented with a CVSS scoring or a severity that typically is hard-coded within the vulnerability scanner and does not have any understanding of asset context or asset sensitivity. So when a vulnerability that says RCE comes along probably with a CVSS scoring of 8 or 9 without actually understanding the asset context. Third thing, threat context and indicators. So most of the vulnerabilities are related to software or OEM, and these vulnerabilities are tagged along with CVEs, which we call as an indicator. Now, like I said earlier, a vulnerability comes with a severity or a CVSS tag, but does not take into account if a vulnerability has a malware attached to it, if it's a 0-day, if it's been used for ransomware, if it's been actively exploited, and so on. Now the best part. Now, if we aggregate and correlate these three things, we would get a better view and priority on what to fix first. So let me give you a couple of examples. So for example, if you know a vulnerability is being actively exploited, but is in an asset with just static data, you can park it aside for a couple of days. Whereas a same vulnerability, if it's inside a critical with PI information, I would want that to be closed overnight or maybe even in the next couple of hours. To do this kind of aggregation and correlation, I 100% believe that there is a need for a platform. So we as engineers are working day in and day out to build a platform that solves this exact issue. Now that we know the challenges and problems, let's deep dive into the platform. I know your first impression looking at the screen is like, wow. Well, this is Stropes, a risk-centered vulnerability management platform that makes VM faster and saves a lot of time for SecOps and IT teams. What you're looking at is an organization list. Stropes was designed to help a CISO from large organization or even SMBs. For example, a large bank CISO can manage all the subsidiaries and business units from one single place. Let's open an organization and explore what Stropes has to provide. After clicking on our organization, we land on an overview page where we get to know some quick information about the entire org. The first thing we need for Stropes to work is assets. Like I mentioned previously, assets can be endpoints, servers, cloud accounts, web, or mobile applications. Stropes supports adding and segregating them all. To create an asset inside the platform, you can do it in multiple ways. You can create an asset manually. You can import assets using different connectors like AWS Asset Inventory, Nessus, or even Expose. If that doesn't work for you, you can even import a CSV into the platform. Once we have assets in place, you can manage assets at scale. The platform is powered by GraphQL and query language. You can manage assets by the data table or programmatically use our API clients. For example, want to know what are the critical assets? Just add a filter with business sensitivity as critical and you can get to know all the assets that are critical. The use cases of using query language are infinite. Now that we have assets in place, it's time to configure continuous scanning on those assets or to even import vulnerabilities. The platform integrates with a variety of tools, vulnerability scanners, and more. We support DAS scanners, SAS scanners that also include software composition analysis, container scanners, infrastructure scanners, and even cloud configuration scanners. As of now, we have close to 45 integrations which are powered by a integration framework we built at the backend. This framework allows us to seamlessly bring in new integration as and when required. On an average, we can take about 7 to 12 odd days to build an integration. Using integrations, doing the scanning is pretty easy. For example, you want to import an SS report. To do that, head over to Import Connectors, select the required options, choose the SS report that you want to import, and click Submit. All the assets and vulnerabilities will be ingested into the platform. The other use case is continuously scanning a code repository for vulnerabilities. Well, we have many open source scanners inbuilt into the platform with CI/CD capabilities. To do that, pick up your favorite scanner, select the repository you want to scan, and configure the other settings that are required. Schedule a scan and click Submit. This will give you the ability to get continuous feedback in the form of risk in those repositories. Now that we figured out how to import and continuously set up scans using different scanners and for different assets, let's head over to vulnerabilities page to manage them. Again, the vulnerabilities page is powered by a data table, GraphQL, and query language. The vulnerabilities which are ingested within the platform are also enriched with threat intel based on CVE indicators. So for example, a vulnerability that has a CVE will be enriched with exploits, threat indicators, malwares, ransomware, 0 days, and more. The threat intel consumed by the platform is homegrown, and we scrap data from various public plus private threat intel feeds. The secret sauce of the platform is how the vulnerabilities, threat context, asset context are correlated to give a platform unique score called as priority score. For example, vulnerabilities with exploit available that are actively being exploited in a critical asset are given higher priority than a vulnerability with no exploit in a non-sensitivity asset. This way, you'll get to know what vulnerabilities to fix first. With the help of priority scores and query language, we can manage vulnerabilities faster. Let's say your IT team wants to know what are the top most critical vulnerabilities they need to patch first. Head over to the filters, select the exploit and priority filters, and click on Export CSV. They get a list of assets and they can move on to patching. Once they patched, they can come back to the platform anytime and move the state of those vulnerabilities to committed. A SecOps team on the other side can reconfirm on those and move them to resolved. A full VM cycle powered by Risk can be achieved like this. Stropes also offers various dashboards for CISO and other stakeholders to understand the risk of an organization at any point of the day, week, or month. We show the risk timeline, current risk score, state-wise vulnerabilities, priority-wise, and more. Well, it doesn't end here. Companies can also request for custom dashboards, and we would be able to achieve that easily. Now that we explored the features, let's talk about the deployment model of Stropes. Stropes was first designed to serve enterprise customers, so we designed the application as an on-premise solution. Later, looking at the traction from SMBs, we also created a multi-tenant SaaS, which is highly scalable. I hope you have enjoyed the demo. We are open for questions and queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akhil, for taking us through that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, up next is a poll question, and we request you to please cast your opinion.
And make margin, right? अब जैसा
Thank you very much, everybody. With that, we'd now like to move forward to our next session, which is Technology in Motion. And our session is going to have inputs by Mr. Nitin Bhatia, Software Sales Manager, Data Protection Solutions, India for Dell Technologies, who's in a conversation with Mr. Shantanu Ganguly, Chief Executive Officer, Strategy. Over to you both, Nitin and Shantanu.
Good day, everyone. This is Shantanu from Strategic. I am the CEO, and I'm delighted to welcome you back into today's webinar, Proactive Business Resilience Insights. As the subject says, this is something very, very interesting and relevant for all our businesses as we lead diverse technology functions in the business organization. In context of today and post the pandemic disruption that we have all gone through deep and intense, we realize all businesses rely on digital technologies, right? And in a perfect world, the organization systems would run without problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and across 365 days in a year. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, right? Disruptions do happen, and as and when they happen, it is the business organization's ability to carry on and continue with their critical operations in the face of their adversity, which defines the resiliency of systems, resiliency of the business. And that's where this proactive resilience and this whole concept is of critical importance ever than before now, and definitely into the future. To tell us more on this topic and to share highlights of technology in motion, I'm delighted to invite in this conversation Nitin Bhatia, Software Sales Manager, Data Protection Solutions at Dell Technologies India. Hi Nitin, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Nitin, our audience today, who are primarily technology, security, decision makers, influencers, and practitioners, would be keen to hear from you how to plan and implement robust data security and data risk mitigation strategies across the business enterprise, right? So, when it comes to reliable business resilience, what would be the top 3 value proposition or unique highlights from Dell Technologies BPS portfolio?
Sure. So Chandra, I think I'm going to be doing a step back on this first question, where it is important to know what are we trying to protect. So first starts with understanding the value of information, understanding the value of data, and that is where the Dell Technology solution plays a vital role through our consulting services in identifying this information. What is the most critical mass that could get an organization out of business? Today, you're looking at different attacks, different types of attack, a mix of attack that happens uh, when it comes to uh, attackers, or I would say hacktivists acting towards your organization. Today, there are government-sponsored attacks. There are various means which takes your organization down. So the most critical part today is building up a cyber resilient architecture. And architecture matters is one important factor that we've been speaking to a lot of customers as an advisor. When we're building an architecture, there are three major parts to a cyber recovery architecture. One is making sure that it is isolated. Second, very important that it is immutable. And third, it is important that we are able to get as much information from it and make sure that you are ready even after you recover for a lot of forensics to do. Why did this happen? More importantly, using technologies when it comes to our number one product, data domain, understanding the data even before it is hidden. That's the key USP that you can get from a Dell Technology solution from Dell EPS.
Excellent. And as you rightly mentioned, defining that holistic architecture first, analyzing the type and nature of data, and then being able to correlate and measure possible business impact, and then sort of designing the mitigation strategy aligned to this holistic ecosystem or architecture centric approach, I think is the most scientific way of doing things so far as data protection and risk mitigation strategies are concerned. Now, Nitin, coming to a situation where we have all experienced that unforeseen adversities do happen, right? So we all went through a situation where majority of workforce were forced to either work from home, they couldn't turn up into their work premises, etc. So and disruptions, each and every industry vertical experience through, some of them still going through in different levels of impact. So how soon and how best can a business recover should an unforeseen disruption happen? Towards that, from a solutioning standpoint, tell us some highlights.
So, Chandra, I'll just peel the onion and make sure that our audience gets the view of how do we recover when the cyber attack happens, right? It is when it comes to, we're talking about recovering from a zero-day situation, which means the impact to the organization is already happened. And the moment you have this solution implemented, we're talking about first making sure that we are getting you back into business by recovering the periphery applications which are dependent for your organization to come back. And I'll give you examples like an Active Directory information. That is the most important part for even your user to authenticate today when the recovery has to happen. More importantly, we are targeting the backup workloads where we're making a copy of that information, keeping it secure, as I said, in an isolated environment, and making a immutable copy of it. So once the immutable copy is there, you are sure of that in the cyber recovery world, your data is sanitized enough to make sure it is recoverable. So now you have a copy of data which can be recovered, which can be accessed, even whatever goes wrong with the organization. So from a recovery standpoint, once you sanitize your environment, this information is readily available for you in the world. And it is about as good as storing a copy of the information from your backup, which is lying in the vault in isolation with the intelligence. So it can happen in minutes. It depends on the quantity of data that you need to get back. And we've had recoveries within a day where people have been back to operations, day-to-day operations, at least from a core platform where they can start doing their invoices, billings, and each data is identified differently.
Excellent. That whole concept of a cyber recovery vault and an immutable copy of data is something which is very, very powerful and so very relevant, especially when we all take into context the volume of targeted attacks, ransomware kind of attacks, which are becoming so very common even for business organizations these days, right? So one really needs to plan proactively and be forward looking in terms of anticipating those, and then uh, be ready from a people process technology standpoint. So Nitin, while you have touched upon already on these, but if you could elaborate a bit on the data integrity and the security aspects of the cyber recovery vault solution or similar solutions that you spoke about, because it is not only important to recover the volumes of data which we want to leverage, but also with as much precise levels of accuracy and with I would say impenetrable or impregnable security, right? So if you could emphasize how that is taken care of, leveraging maybe artificial intelligence or as much human intervention free automation.
Sure. So, Chandra, I'll put this into three categories right now. Okay. When we speak to our customers, this is something that I have been always prominently educating them with, saying cyber resilience is a wall that you will try and build. As much amount of entry points that you define is what your data security will be defining, right? So we already have the perimeters in place. We have DLPs, insider threat. So different threats, you need to implement different strategies. And more importantly, when we start a conversation, and when, as I said, our consulting team helps you identify the data, but a lot number of times, customers have this information at hand. I've had customers who come back and say, Nitin, believe me, I don't look at the most billing platform that is important, but if you could keep a copy of this formulas that we've developed in last so many years of our business, just keep this 10 terabyte of data secure. And that starts with the practice of good, better, and best. Okay, and I will categorize the solution into good, where we are talking about just keeping a copy of that information into an immutable infrastructure on a disk platform which could recover faster, which means you know that the data is sanitized. There is not going to be any impact. This is the most critical heartbeat environment. You've done all your scannings around it. It just needs to be kept in a worm kind of a device, which is immutable, so that nothing can be written onto it. And that copy is maintained. So that's where the good starts. At Good, we've put technologies into our product. And I'll give you as a part of this conversation. A lot of times, as we're dealing with backup information, right? It is important that even the NTP clock tampering would impact the backup environment, right? I just need to move your attention off. I will change the clock of your devices and everything is being erased. It's self-destructive. Now, whether it's self-destructive, we've made sure that our technologies are in such a way that even after the access that has been with the administrator, he cannot range it between a day. It is few minutes that he can range into, but he cannot move to a day. Over and above that, we've had advancement into the technology where we're talking about a make-a-check model, which means a security officer and an administrator coming together can only delete information. So that's the next level of security into the vault itself. So it could start with the biometric access into the rack versus doing a maker-checker environment. And now this was elevation from good to a better kind of a situation, where you now have two people coming in together only for information. Now I'll come to the best part where we're talking about the intelligence. As I said, it is immutable, isolated, immutable, and then it is intelligence. So we have our OEM partner index engine, where we're using a product called as CyberSense, which doesn't do metadata search. A lot number of times, and I would not want to name people here, but people say, once I've done the search on my metadata, I am securing that my backup is readable. But believe me, if you get an intelligence of understanding that there has been a change in the way the data is written, there's been a large change, you're able to give a lot of information pre your attack to make sure that your data is secure. So the intelligence that we are talking about is AI driven, where we are talking about close to 1,000 plus ransomwares that we are analyzing and making sure that every information that lands in your world is being looked upon. And over and above that, this is looked upon without even recovering your data, which means it is cost effective. Imagine an organization saying, I have 100 plus terabytes of information, which is going to convert into petabytes of information as backup. And that needs to be scanned and intelligence to be derived out of it. It is sheer time that we are against. Just to give you a context, up to 197 days is what an organization takes even to detect what that they've been impacted. Now, imagine if all this data is available, petabytes of scan, what is that we're leading to? So these are the three pillars and three solutions that we're getting to the table as data protection division of Dell Technologies, making sure that the data is in a vault, it has the intelligence, and it can in a recoverable state.
Awesome, excellent. I think Nitin Bhatia, thank you for brilliantly summarizing unique highlights of data protection solution capabilities from Dell Technologies. As we wrap up this session for our audience, here is a quick tip I would want to leave you with on some of the points Nitin already shared, plus summarizing couple from my end, which are, say, top 5 common elements of how you develop a cyber resiliency blueprint. And it's more of a sort of broad guidelines of approach. So number one, Nitin already mentioned, identify your vital information and security vulnerabilities, right? So you first define your ecosystem, analyze what's more important versus less, where you have maximum business impact. And once you know that prioritized categorization, then you can decide upon the next steps. Secondly, once you know what to protect and in what category, you then decide about implementing the necessary safeguards, the proactive safeguards or preventive safeguards that you would use in terms of technology, in terms of processes, in terms of people and skills to protect critical infrastructure and services. Right? Number 3, in spite of all the safeguards, we all face situations where disruptions do happen. So if a disruption or an attack actually happens, and we experience it, how do we detect it? So there has to be a solid implementation of a detection system, and our ability to assess, detect, and implement a timely response. That's number 3, so that we try to contain it in the shortest possible time and minimize the impact to business. Fourth point is about creating a response plan. Again, more from a technology, people, process standpoint, with clearly defining roles and responsibilities, who will do what in time of a crisis or a disruption, while trying to minimize the business impact, because that advanced definition, a clear plan, and some training and regular review, some simulations, make sure that when an actual disruption and response situation occurs, your team works like a very well synchronized system, and then in reality you are able to contain the impact to business to as minimal as possible. And last but not the least, Nitin elaborated on these. How do you develop and implement a plan to restore any data or services affected by an attack? That's where the relevance of the cyber resiliency vault and then immutable copy of data, as all the intelligence Nitin spoke about, comes into relevance. So thank you, Nitin, for this short but very precise and crisp and high impact discussion. Truly appreciate you taking of time and sharing this knowledge and snippets of very compelling solution highlights with our audience. So while I sign off at this moment to our audience, don't go away. We'll be right back with the next session in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nitin. Thank you, Shantanu, for that very engaging and insightful conversation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, is the next poll question, and we request you to please cast your opinion for this one too. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Our next segment is Profile in Success. And for this one, I'm now going to welcome Mr. Venkat Murthy, who's the prime mover at 22 by 7 Solutions, who's in a conversation with Mr. Arjun Vishwanathan, Chief Research Officer at Strategy. Over to the both of you.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Arjun Vishwanathan, and I'm going to be in a fascinating conversation today to discuss matters related to how, as digital transformation and hyperconvergence create unintended gateways to risks, vulnerabilities, attacks, and failures, a cyber resilience strategy quickly becomes not just necessary, but an imperative for businesses and organizations. A cyber resilience strategy, therefore, helps organizations reduce risks, financial impact, and obviously, and last but certainly not the least, reputational damages. And to talk to me about all of this and more, please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to Venkat Murthy, Prime Mover, 22 by 7 Solutions Private Limited. Venkat, welcome. Delighted that you could join us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you so much. You just heard the preamble. The last 18 months or so have been such that have been transformational in their ability to expose organizations and businesses within India and, of course, globally to far, far greater risks than we've ever imagined. And therefore, traditional strategies towards cyber resilience and cyber security today stand perhaps outdated. In your view, and as an IT practitioner who's elbow and perhaps neck deep in technology, what is your view on the convergence of business strategy with the overall concepts of cybersecurity? Venkat Murthy.
Thank you, Arjun. I must start saying that last 18 months, I'm really fascinated to see the way entire industry is sort of swiftly reacted to the entire this fiasco of so-called SARS or the COVID, whatever you call it, right? So really go through the entire life cycle of the reaction. I would call went into three phases. One, first 2-3 months when the moment we hit the COVID, we really don't know what to really do. people, entire organizations for first 3 to 4 months were only looking at trying to get the access to their employees who's working from home, working from things like that. Slowly from there, they started really, working on, sort of improving the productivity, right? In the sense they wanted to ensure that the uptime is, sort of cross 90%, 95%, 100% and stuff like that. Now, if you see last 6 to 8 months, there are a lot of discussions are happening. How do I become more competitive advantage in spite of being at working from home? What kind of technologies to be adopted, right? So that's the reason why now I'm happy to see this word CRS, right? The cyber resilience, thing sort of, I think the gap between the business continuity and this is sort of reducing. Now every board discussions, they are talking about how well I'm able to, give my virtual machine or the machine to my employee, how secure it is going to be. Is that can become a competitive advantage? What kind of models that I need to really adapt to ensure that I get a business advantage, both in terms of business continuity, business security, and also the cost. I think I see quite interesting trends happening across the industry, the kind of, the methods people are adapting, the kind of, the workloads they're trying to move between the clouds. It's a very fascinating thing for the last 6 to 8 months, I must say, Arjun.
That's an interesting point that you've made, Venkat, because my question is therefore in continuum to what you've just narrated, which is also that what we have also seen transpire and organizations imbibe over the last 18 odd months is the race or the acceleration to innovation. The rate of acceleration of innovation is today perhaps one of the metrics that is very clearly measured across boardrooms. My question to you is at a more fundamental level. When organizations sit down and when you advise organizations to sit down and craft a sustainable, robust security strategy of sorts, how do you kind of converge innovation that is unhindered by security strategies that would envelope it?
No, today, if you discuss any discussions are starting with a fundamental point of my data availability, right? Everything sort of encapsulates the solutions we give around which, right? So now we are trying to slowly move around saying that now, since the availability part of sort of taken care, can I do anything innovatively to engage a customer, engage a client, engage, my stakeholders, could be internal or external, right? So the discussions are going in such direction saying that as an organization, like for example, 22/7, we are going a little away to ensure that what kind of technologies which are going to help us. Let me give you an example, right? Now, since we're talking about security, one of my clients were extremely, finicky about, their security awareness, what is going to, take a hindrance due to this, COVID last 12 to 18 months,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed.
Now, they just want to ensure, because once they know when the employee sort of gets aware properly, the chances of he doing a mistakes are going to be very, 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 minimal. Correct. So we are working out with the solutions. We need to really get in a new vendors into the India to really ensure that they get that kind of a artificial intelligence learning platform. We sort of really help them to solve a bigger problem in terms of now the employees does lesser the mistakes. The chance of data pilferage is going to be much lesser. So in the process, their SLS are going to be much higher. So if you really look at not just the technology, but the people process technology together is sort of going to make a huge difference in ensuring that you really sort of accelerate your business and get onto that competitive advantage so-called space.
Interesting. And therefore, Venkat, in your view, considering we're speaking about CRS here today, how do you see CRS fit in as one of the prime foundational pillars of an organization's security or cyber resilience strategy while they envision the enterprises of tomorrow?
No, Arjun, if you really see the CRS, people used to call business continuity is always there earlier, right? It sort of got into limelight because of this COVID.
Indeed.
Now, earlier it was a byproduct. Now it's sort of becoming a central, what do you call the extremely focused area to really the point. Whenever out of 5 out of 10 meetings, we are only discussing about the resiliency and security and stuff like that. That's sort of becoming it's become a standard to really start our conversations. Like, how do I ensure that my data is available? Though I ensure that my data is sort of containerized and given the security, right? Yeah, in the entire. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to map the security aspects in the entire life cycle of an employee, starting from he joins, he starts training, he start producing, he sort of resigns and goes. So they want to ensure that the so-called compliance measures have been taken care in each and every life cycle of a employee life cycle of an organization. I think that sort of opens up a greater Pandora box in terms of giving newer technologies, introducing newer processes, ensuring that customer gets a better ROI. So if you really look at this new phenomena, doesn't restrict IT to get into only a data center, right? It's not sort of getting a extremely business. They are going to be part of business. In fact, last month I met a CIO. In fact, met means digitally I met a CIO.
Indeed, so.
He is now, unlike last 10 years, he's been in that organization for more than 10 years. Unlike ever, he's been asked to present in boardroom every month. And believe me, it is not about technology, what servers you're buying, what's what you call how do I say what infrastructure you're going to do it. No, they are in fact trying to measure him based on how do I improve my revert to the market, right? How quickly I can deploy my apps, things like that, right? How do I increase my productivity? In fact, one of the project is saying that how do I measure a productivity of a person when I'm sitting in front of a computer? Is there any tools which will ensure that will I know my attention span of an individual? The discussions points are literally going away from data center to a business. Once we really sort of understand the business, then it becomes very incidental that we come and give a right solutions which sort of sits in a data center. So in that way, I think the discussions are going beyond the speeds and feeds, more of a business, more of a use cases.
So Venkat, there's an interesting question therefore, which is that as you're rightly saying that mindsets are shifting and fairly radically, how do you take a consultative approach with customers, with your clients, in also building and developing with them a robust strategy that is created today, but will take care of tomorrow, where there's acts of state-sponsored cyber terrorism. There are obviously independent actors. There's the deep, dark web. When you look at all of this, how difficult or easy do you find the ability to drive conversations that are more future-looking and therefore break traditional mindset silos?
I think pretty interesting question, Arjun. I think the discussion points, if I'll tell you what we are doing as in 22/7, right? So last 18 months, we are going with a very clear agenda that we are going to provide you future ready solutions rather than a future proof, because they've realized that there's nothing like future proof.
Indeed.
We just have to be future ready. So we have changed our approach, saying that we sort of do a future ready. Now, can this future ready approach in implementing, in a customer's place, in their IT strategy or IT procurement or whatever you call it, should not start with a product. It should rather start with a agenda,
a problem or an opportunity.
Exactly, problem or opportunity. Also understanding their business and how this IT is going to leverage, or how the so-called technology is going to give them that additional leverage so that they get competitive advantage in any manner. I'm saying it's price, positioning, trying to revert to the market, right? So see, one of the customer, rather, one of the customer, what we are discussing is, now they if they run a particular test, right, in earlier scenario, it was taking some 72 to sort of 100 hours to just complete one particular test. So we are having a discussion, is there any way we can even reduce the test by into 24 hours?
Indeed.
Now, see the repercussion of doing the test. The repercussion of doing the test is within 24 hours is that, and to release a product, they need to do such many tests, right? 8, 10, 20 tests. If you can complete the cycle in 24 hours, they are 3 months ahead in the market. That sort of gives them a greater, competitive advantage. That is number one. So when it comes to 22/7, how we are engaging our customers. So as I said, we are going out with a concept saying that we try and work with you. Okay. Rather, for a change, last 6 months, 8 months, what we are doing is we are trying to do something called customer experience centers. Okay.
Indeed.
Where it is not about technology. We are going and understanding. In fact, we are asking customers to come out and explain us half a day their infrastructure. See, what is happening earlier, we are going and selling silos. If I'm a security guy, I'm going and selling a silo. If I'm a storage guy, I'm doing storage, networking. If you really look at the business, and Arjun, one thing I must say that the ownership patterns are also changing. When customer trust 22/7, they're saying, Venkat, I know you're doing ABCD, but you should also watch for another partner who's trying to give us a ecosystem products. Let's say HIMS, whatever it is, like HRMS, because end of the day, whichever is the application has to work with your IT.
Indeed.
Correct?
So in conclusion, therefore, Venkat, because I do have a view on the clock, I do know you've got a hard schedule ahead. if you were to state the position of, or the position of 22/7 in three industry words, what would they be?
The trust. Okay, because they know that we are there. We will seriously
Indeed.
change the our support modules. So we now no more the SLAs 8 bar 5, 12 bar 7. We are saying we're just available whenever you want. So I think that's changed us. The trust and thing is there. And consultative approach. We understand the customer when we're trying to do that. Okay. And third and most important thing is ownership. No, we never run away in case of even a failure, right? We are there with the customer. I think these are the three important things which is really driving us, though they might, all of them are a non-IT, but I feel non-technical, but I feel these are the three fundamental things keeping us really away from.
And it's such a dichotomy, isn't it, Venkat? Technology increasingly is becoming non-IT.
Non-IT, exactly.
That's what we're seeing. But Venkat, it was nothing short of a delight speaking with you and hearing your words. Unfortunately, much as I'd like to continue, that pretty much is what we have time for. But a privilege indeed it has been. Thank you.
Arjun, nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
And to the audience, that was I, Arjun Vishwanathan, in conversation with Venkat Murthy of 22/7 Solutions. Stay tuned with us and we'll be back with the next segment in just a moment.
Thank you very much, Venkat and Arjun, for sharing those gems of insight. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to a conclusion for today's episode. And we'd like to thank all of you once again for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the webinar series on proactive business resilience insights on behalf of Dell Technologies, 22/7 Solutions, and Strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to welcoming you at our upcoming conferences and webinars. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great day ahead.